All
Great.
right.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome. I am Shari Miller, and I'm in Angela Pan's cohort on the path of the protege, and I'm here today with David Hime, doing a mini critique of 5 of his pieces of work. And David, want to just say hello?
Good morning.
Good
Glad to
morning.
be here this morning.
I'm glad to be with you as well. I'm excited to do this with you. I just wanted to start by asking you a little bit about what were your goals with these photos that you were doing this time?
These are all photos that are kind of my most recent my most recent works, the most recent things I've done. I've been busy with life over the last few months and haven't really gotten out shooting much. So, quite honestly, most of this was just related to finally getting out with my camera and taking some pictures. And it turned out several of these, well, 4 of the 5 were taken on one weekend trip down to the coast, and it was just so almost euphoric to be out. It was beautiful, amazing weather. I had great experiences with some people I met, and it was just one of those, like, it had been bottling up inside me for a while because I hadn't been out much, and then this amazing weekend happened for me, and that's what 4 of these 5 pictures are, and they really just represent almost my entire body of work over the last 3 months. You know, just not all the pictures I took, but I just haven't been out shooting as much, so it's just my most recent work. So I thought we could talk about what I've done recently.
Excellent, excellent. I definitely understand that euphoria that can come from being out with the camera if you haven't been there for a while. So
Yeah.
let's go ahead and jump right in on this.
Okay.
Share the screen with you, and let me know if you see. Do you see Lightroom on your image?
I do.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay. Then why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about this image?
I purchased. This is a flying camera. I think I'll use that term. This is a flying camera image from of a water fountain here in Austin, Texas, down at a place called Butler Park. And I've only been on 2 flights with my flying camera. I bought a DJI. I can't remember the model name. It's the Vision Plus, and it's got a little camera which actually shoots raw images, and but it doesn't do bracketed series or anything like that. But anyway, I've gone out on 2 different occasions to try and learn how to fly it. This was one where I got out there before the sun started coming up, and I wanted to get some sunrise shots over downtown Austin, and I got some of those, and they're okay. But this little camera had a lot of noise in the images. It was so early in the morning; it's kind of overcast. So I started hovering around just very close to where I was standing, and I got right above this little fountain. And I'm always drawn to things that have symmetry to them, and I thought this was a really interesting view to get to hover right above this fountain and take this picture. So it's just a drone photograph taken from above a fountain here in Austin, but it kind of makes me wonder, all the little kids who play in here on a hot summer day probably have no idea that it says the words Town Lake on it. You know, it's like the architect or the designer probably designed that, and a bunch of people never even know that that's part of the design until you look at it from this view.
Oh yeah, I love the spiral, the way that it comes in. It's got another one of those kind of portal looks to it. You know, with the lines coming in and swirling and toward the middle. I'm curious, what is the scale? So you're talking about that they're playing in this, and they might not have any idea what the letters, are saying there.
Each of those little fountains squirting up in the air are probably shooting up about 4 feet or so.
Okay.
Maybe even taller, maybe 4 to 6 feet, because they're shooting up pretty high. And I was actually only hovering, I would say, no higher than about 15 feet above this thing, but it's a very wide-angle perspective, so it looks like you're pretty high, but it's a very wide-angle lens. on that little camera. And so kids in the summer, just be running through this fountain. It's all, there's nothing that stands above ground. It's all ground level. And so the water just drains back into that little drains in the middle there. And kids just run through there, and could lay in there. And it's really kind of fun in the summer. That would be a great place to go back just on a summer day and take pictures of children playing in this thing.
Oh yeah, to get some street photography and portraits.
Yeah.
That'd be very cool. No, it's a very interesting shot, and like I said, I like the. I can tell that you really took care. Did you crop this at all?
I did. Yeah, I did.
To make sure to get the. I was going to say because the symmetry looks really good on both sides. From the upper left-hand corner where that one is coming over to the bottom one that is in the exact opposite area of that as well. So great symmetry, great composition of that as well. I like the idea that you have behind this and what you were trying to, your goal with that. I can't tell or not if it's just the concrete down on it. Is the concrete a little bit marbled? What do I want to say?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Because I thought that was the case, and I didn't think it was noise, but I wasn't quite sure on that.
But there is noise in this picture, and that's why why this shot kind of worked out okay, is because it's of granite, and it's not, and so there's a lot of texture in the granite.
Right.
And it masks the noise, but there is noise in this. It was barely light when I was shooting it, and there's just a lot of noise in this shot, and I tried some noise reduction, but it just didn't work with all the natural texture that was in the shot from the granite.
Yeah, it might be something that a lot of the people in the cohort have been playing with textures, doing just a very, very light texture on it, just to kind of add that kind of intentional type of look to it. Maybe that's something
Right.
that you could try with it. Just so that you're not like looking at going, is that noise or is that not noise, or is that granite? If you put the texture in, maybe that would be more, yes, I am intentionally trying to make this look
Right.
as it looked. I also might, although I noticed in your goals what you had said, that a lot of the colors that you're choosing right now seem to be kind of muted a little bit, more of that calming kind of color. That was the one thing that initially, before I had read your goals, I might have said, maybe play with a little bit of the contrast, just slightly, to have the colors pop a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if that goes against what your goal was for the image, then stick with what you have.
I think you're right. Looking at it this morning, this image wasn't one with an intentional muted palette. It is just this is sort of like, seems to be kind of the natural color of that granite there, but I think that especially bringing a tiny bit up on the reds might make that a little more vivid, and I think it would look better.
Yeah, I wonder what that would. I'd love to see that again with just a hint of that, and maybe in the. I'm not sure which color it would be, whether it would be the blues, greens, or aquas of the places where the water goes down too, because it's kind of like that green, and it would kind of be that other kind of a. I don't think it is specifically a complementary color, but one of those colors that'll kind of bounce off the red rust color in there too.
Yeah.
So.
Right. I think it's a good idea.
Interesting shot.
Well, I'm just trying to play around with this drone and try and figure out what views make an interesting shot. And so far, the few that I've taken that I've liked the most are from straight above. And so anyway, I'll keep playing with it and enjoying the idea of seeing things from a very different angle than we normally see them.
Oh, absolutely. I can embrace that totally. Seeing things from different perspectives. Okay, let's go to the next one here. Tell us a little bit about this one.
So there's a bird sanctuary down in Rockport, Texas, called the Aransas National Wildlife Refuge, and I got up early one morning and went out there and kind of hiked around through this kind of mucky grass to get out close to the water's edge, and then just I took a lot of photos of the sunrise and I loved it. It was awesome to be out there. But this little heron was off in the distance, and I took some views of him while he was hunting, and I took some pictures of him with a telephoto zoom. I think this one's actually taken at a 300 millimeters on a micro four thirds, so it's a 600 millimeter equivalent. And so he was quite a ways away from me, but it's like he just got done, and he decided to head back to land, and he tucked his neck down there and just started strolling back to the land area. And so anyway, I took a bunch of pictures of him while he was kind of making his way back, and it was still early in the morning and kind of foggy, and the sky didn't really have any definition. But I just birds make easy subjects usually, and so I like the lone bird in this otherwise kind of foggy, mysterious landscape. Is why I chose this photo. This is one that I didn't really intentionally make the scene muted. This is how it was. I just didn't accentuate anything. I didn't try and make the background or the foreground or anything more vivid. It was just this misty kind of foggy morning feel is what my intention was with the processing here, is to keep that.
I think you did a great job of keeping that misty, muted, mysterious look on this one too. And I find it interesting that you say that birds make easy subjects. That is, if they're standing still and not flying away.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. You can get a lot of bird tails in your photos, can't you?
Yes, or a lot of blurred feathers and all of that too. Exactly. As you're chasing them around. No, there's lots that I really like about this image, especially the fact that you've got this great piece of land over here that the grass looks very nice and defined, both in the top part and in the interesting look and the reflection that it gives here too, and that it points directly to the main subject, which is wonderful. And then there's just this hint of this blue right here across that blue line in the water that also just happens, it's where his trail is that points to him too. And I wonder if you could maybe take that up just a little, just a hint, not to make it saturated or anything, but just bring maybe the vibrance up slightly, just to make that even more less subtle.
You're talking about that blue line in the water, like that runs right through his legs, sort of?
Yes.
Your pointer is up, to me, your pointer is up above that line.
Oh, so, really?
Yeah.
That's odd.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's the one that goes through his legs.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting. I never, until this moment, even noticed that line. But you are so amazing at finding those little leading lines and those things like that. So, yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Well, and it's funny because initially when I saw that, I like the landscape choice for that, but with the subject over so far toward the center, I was like, oh, to take the side a little bit off and crop it in. And then I noticed that line, and I thought, oh, no, that can stay there, especially if you bring that out a little bit more so you have both the land and that blue line pointing directly to your subject there.
I like that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and then I think you can also maybe keep the same mysterious look. Again, maybe just playing with the contrast a little bit, just to make I like the muted feel and the mysterious feel of it, but I think you might be able to make just a slight hint in contrast, just to make the differences between the darks and the lights just a little bit more noticeable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So that it's less, keeping less, because sometimes I kind of look at this and it looks a little bit grayish with it, but maybe if you play with the contrast just a little bit, just very slightly, just to give it a little bit more of the contrast between the two.
Got it.
On that.
Got it.
Otherwise, I think the intention that you had for this, you executed that very nicely. All right, and now to this one. I absolutely love this image, David, since the first time I saw it. And I thought it was interesting what you wrote about it, that this was an acquired taste or something like that. What was it? Go ahead and tell me a little bit about it.
Oh, it's it's part of this is later. This is about 3 hours after that last photo was taken, 2 hours maybe. Um, this nice man was out with his son when I was coming out of that bird refuge, and he was just watching. He and his son were watching the sun come up, and they were on their way to get breakfast for the family, and just pulled over to watch the sun come up. And so I started a conversation with him, and it turns out his wife was a professional photographer in the area, did a lot of like portraits and senior pictures and things like that. So anyway, we started a conversation. And later on, he just asked if I wanted to go out in his boat with him, and I said, "Hell's yeah!" And so we went out in his little boat, and we went back into these ultra shallow little bays where the water's no more than about 8 to 12 inches deep, and it's just quiet, 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 and all the birds. Of course, it's a wildlife refuge, and it was just, and he was such a nice person, and it was just like a great morning. And then these clouds started coming in, and it was just like they rolled in, and pretty soon it was almost like a whiteout, and the water was so calm, and you could not see where the land and the sky joined. And I originally took photos of that, but as honestly, they turned out to just be a gray photo. You couldn't see where the land was, and I mean where the horizon was. So as we continued to move across the bay, it's called St. Charles Bay. These little poles came into view, and as we went past, I snapped some shots, and I liked the fact that the poles were at this kind of disappearing perspective, going off in the distance, but it also showed that little strip of land which gave some definition to the horizon. And my first crops on this were a little bit tighter than this, but honestly, it's so disorienting you can't even tell what you're looking at. So for purposes of this technique, I brought the crop back out so you could see that there were some clouds up there so that you could then get a sense of what you're looking at. It was really, really a cool, weird atmospheric condition that just came upon us real suddenly, and it was partly made possible by the gray clouds, but it was also by the absolutely perfectly still water that we were in. And so I ended up getting a number of different photos, and this was a real changing situation. I got some others where the clouds suddenly developed some texture, and then that texture is reflected off in this water as well. But I just like this kind of zen feeling of this photo, and the all the negative space, and you're forced to concentrate just on the points of interest, the disappearing poles in the water, the little piers, and so anyway, that's the story behind that one.
Well, and I don't think I really need to say much more than what you just said. What you just said, it would have been my my critique. Ever since the first time I saw this, I love it. Of course, I'm a huge fan of negative space too and
Mm-hmm.
abstract
Mm-hmm.
imagery. But just I will say some of the things that I love about it is that the disappearing poles going back in there, and I also love the fact that on the right-hand side you've got this that little black dot on the horizon there, and it seems like there's I've heard people talk about the comfort of shapes when you see shapes or geometric patterns in images, and there's this really narrow triangle that your eyes make here with this black dot over here that goes across the horizon over to the end here, and then comes back down to this main one. And so it's this really wide triangle that just feels so restful to my eyes with the rest of that negative space. And I also appreciate the fact that I do like this new crop, the larger crop, that you do have some of this cloud texture in the background there, and that you have that just barely visible hint of blue that gives you that context of where you are. This is one of those that I think I could print and big and put up somewhere, and that could be in what you talk about, your meditation room, your Zen room, wherever you
Mm-hmm.
are.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of my favorites of your work, David.
Thank you, Shari.
Absolutely love it, love it, love
I
it, love
think
it.
I think the new crop gives it maybe I would say a more comforting feel because honestly, I played with it with that tight crop a lot. Angela suggested I brighten it a little bit more, but there's no tonal range in this. It's either black or white, and when you brighten it at all, it just goes to white, and you honestly have no idea what you're looking at. So
Right.
this slightly, it's not slightly. This is almost the whole image right here, just not cropped. It it gives you that, like I said, that bit of familiarity, and I think it makes the picture work better because there is a little bit of tonal range now, plus that little bit of blue, like you said, instead of just pure black and pure white.
Right. Yeah, I could sit and look at this one all
Oh,
day
thank you.
long, David.
Yeah,
Great
thank you.
image.
I like it. I like it too.
All right, tell me about this one.
So again, same weekend. This place in Texas, Rockport, is one of the unique uh, features that it has are these oak groves that grow essentially right up to the water. So these really, really interesting trees are all around there. Coastal winds buffet these trees all the time, and but these oaks are really big and healthy. And this stand of oak trees, I have noticed on a couple of trips there, and I've gone to photograph them. I've gone with inside those trees and then shot the sunrise, and I've been outside the trees shooting the sunrise, reflecting off of them because we're looking west from an easterly perspective right here. And I've gotten close and I've gotten far away, and there's a little road that goes through there, and I've tried to get the road going into the trees, and I've not ever been really feeling like I've captured anything that looked as interesting as the trees look in real life. But my wife and I were driving back to our little rental house one day, late in the day, and it was kind of cloudy and not very pretty or anything like that. We saw these herons up sitting at the very top, so we pulled over, sitting in the tops of these trees. So we pulled over to just watch them for a while because I'd never seen a nesting heron. You always see them wading in the water, but never up in their nests. And they were just like, it was like the end of the day for them. They were kind of stretching out and kind of looked like they might have been telling stories of the day and to each other. And then, so I grabbed my camera and started taking some pictures again with my 300 millimeter telephoto zoom and trying to get close enough to them to see their shapes with the camera. And I like the way the birds add that little bit of animated interest to the landscape of trees. But the one with his neck craning up there, I just thought that it kind of parallels the tree trunks below, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like he's calling it a day. And I love that the birds were just up there relaxing together, kind of socially. And again, a heron is a bird that you almost always see out on his own, hunting, fishing, and they were just appearing to be kind of socially aware, their little community of birds. And this was the shot that finally made me that I liked the way the trees were with the addition of the birds in the top of it.
Yeah, this is a really cool shot, and I hear what you're saying with the herons too. We have them up here on the lake where I go photograph a lot, and usually see them on their own. And one day I was down there and I saw six creatures down together, and they all had their necks down and everything, and I could not figure out what they were because it was so different for me to see them as a group instead of singular, like you talked about. So I don't know that I've ever seen them nesting like this before either, in the water. And what you say about about especially this one up at the top in relation to the rest of the twisted, curvy trees, it just it's such an interesting mimic. I mean, it just is mimicking the trees. It's like it's living into what it's living in there. I love that. And what I see this and I see so many. This is one of those images that I love because I think that there are so many different variations of how you could do this this image. One thing I thought about was even using like a 16:9 type of a crop and focusing in on that one bird.
Like a
doing,
vertical crop?
yeah, a vertical 16:9, which you don't see too often, but I've seen a few
Hmm.
people do it, and it looks really interesting to do that. That was one thing I thought of, just to focus on that one lone bird up at the top.
Hmm.
Though I like this crop as well. But then, I mean, you've got these trees. You could do another, another kind of an image just focusing on the trees. You could do another really pano shot up here just with the birds. So many different possibilities here that you could do. Great capture and great feel to them. Coming to the end of the day. I noticed it's that kind of muted feel again
Hmm.
on it, and so I wonder if just a slight, if that's the feel that you're going for, then leave it, but maybe just a slight tweak on maybe the contrast again, just to kind of make a little bit more of a difference between the colors. But again, if that would change your feel, then stick with it. Another thing was I kind of feel like I want more ground here. Was this the full frame image that you have, or have you cropped it?
Only cropped enough to straighten the horizon a little bit. It's pretty much the whole image. I was
Okay.
zoomed in pretty tight on this particular one. I have some others that are zoomed further out, and the ground in front of there is pretty ugly, just kind of patchy sand and grass. But I can certainly look back through those other images. I kind of chose this one because of the focus on the tree trunks, and didn't feel like a foreground really added much to it, but
Right.
maybe it would give it a little better context too, to have a little more earth in the photo.
Well, and what I wonder is, I definitely wouldn't say, add a lot of foreground to it, because that isn't your focus. But to me, it feels a little bit like I want a little bit more of a grounding,
Hmm.
and maybe that it is more symmetrical with what the space is given from here,
Yeah.
from the edge of the tree line up to the top, and give
Yeah.
about the same amount down here. And maybe it's a question of, if you find another one of your images that you have more of that ground in it, use something like a Gaussian blur, or some way, make it so you're not looking at that, but that it kind of holds the image,
Got
grounds
it.
it together
I got it.
there.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I like that. It
I
was
really like.
uh, it was late in the afternoon. I don't know I'll play with the contrast. I actually brought this up. This was these tree trunks were really dark, and I brought up the shadows quite a bit, which introduces noise. But the tree trunk, the bark of the tree trunk, I think masks that fairly well.
Oh yeah.
And so bringing back down some of those, with the contrast slider or the tonal curve or the curves, should be pretty easy to do.
Or even what you've been talking about too, with the luminosity masks, maybe in the green,
Mhm.
just a
Mhm.
hint of that too. Might
Yeah,
be interesting on that. And then
good suggestions.
and these are just little nitpicky things, but I noticed there's like this little red in the. Can you see where I'm pointing there?
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
little
Your
red.
your pointer is not on the image for me, so
Well,
you're
that's
using a little
interesting.
off calibration. Yeah, but I see what you're talking about near the bottom,
Yeah, and then there's
bottom right.
and then also there's a little person I see in there too that you might consider taking out as well. Do you see that one
Yeah.
too, right in
Hmm.
the,
Yeah. Yeah. Right in
you
the middle.
might kind of close to where I'm trying to point there. But yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
I'll look at that, and there's no sense in having any distractions in that lower part of the photo, right?
Right, right. Because we're about the tree trunks leading right up to those gorgeous birds up at the top.
Good.
Okay, let's go to the last one. Tell me about this.
This was one same weekend. It was maybe the morning after the heron shot at sunrise photo again, and I had actually used that app for my iPad called the Photographer's Ephemeris to try and plot out a sunrise photo, and we were on a little key, a little small island, and these shore breaks, I think is what these are called, just kind of help break up the waves. Um, I thought that if I, could find one pointing directly to the rising sun, that it might make for an interesting shot. So I used my iPad and kind of plotted out where the sun would be and where these shore breaks would be pointing right towards the rising sun. And I drove there, in the dark, and got there and started walking up and down the shoreline. And sure enough, I got to the one that right as the sun started to brighten in the horizon, I got set up on the one that was pointing directly at it. And I
Wow.
and I and I worked the scene a lot, higher perspective, lower perspective, a little more angled perspective, but I didn't want to get any of the land or anything that was along the sides of me there. This was one where I was set up nice and low, really maybe 12 inches off the ground or so, and I took some bracketed series of photos as the sun was making its way up, and this was the +2 image, and rather than, to me it was just more beautiful without the blending. I liked the +2 exposure. It gave a lot of detail to the little rock line there, and I liked the foreground. Not that it's that pretty. It was just old cinder blocks and some oyster shells and stuff like that. It's not that pretty or anything, but it's very, very clear and very sharp. And then I really liked the overexposed sky and the nothingness. And I think you and I have communicated often enough about negative space and mystery and peacefulness and all that, that this picture kind of gathered that to me, that the line was pointing straight out into a mysterious unknown. And I liked that aspect. I have another photo from this series that's a very different look, and you can see the horizon, you can see the sun, but the water is just this beautiful painterly blues and pinks from the rising sun. But this was my favorite. This is completely, well, essentially uncropped out of the camera, and I'm drawn to the white center that the line is pointing into.
Yeah, I think that you and I speak the same language when it comes to negative space and the mystery in the images. It's such This is such an interesting photo in the sequence of your other ones. I think just because it is a little bit different, it's got more of the more vibrancy. I would say with it, with the brighter, more of the yellows and the blues and the pinks up over there. And the composition, I think your choice to go low was a good one. You say that this area down here at the bottom is you said not pretty, but the interest there is fabulous. That you can see what is there below the water. I love those kind of shots. And I was in a photography competition one time, and I got taken off for having something that was a leading line right into a corner. But for some reason, I think this is one time where I'd be like, I don't know about that, because this seems to work. It just comes right up here, along with all these other lines from the clouds coming from both directions and from over here. And I think the favorite part of this image is this elliptical halo. And again, the whole thing is showing at least partly where it is. That's like can you see that around the?
Yeah.
It's like an eye almost. The shape there. I think that just it brings us right into that center area. And what's interesting is that I know that this is overexposed, but it doesn't feel like that hot, burnt look to it. It looks like it's just right on that edge before it'd be too much. But to me, it does what you're wanting it to do. It brings that mystery to it. If I were to say anything about it, I would wonder what it might look like to take the clouds out. And that's totally nitpicking, because I'm not really sure whether I would prefer it that way or not without that. Although you can see the faint reflection of it down there, so I might take those words back now that I look at it more closely here.
Okay.
Because initially I was saying, maybe take those out and have that cleaner, like down here, but you can see that reflection just barely there too. So Yeah, I like this shot, like the other one that you have that has the negative space and the line, the horizon line, the white one. There's just a lot. It brings a certain mood, a certain feel. I think you had your intention there, and you pulled it off.
Thanks. I played with the exposure a little bit. You know, you can bring it up or bring it down, maybe one stop at most with my camera. But I brought it down just a little bit to avoid that overly hot look you were talking about.
Uh-huh.
Looking at it this morning, it kind of makes me wonder if I couldn't crop off some of the bottom rockiness a little bit and make the pole come a little bit more out of the bottom of the photo as opposed to so much into the exactly into the corner. And but I don't know. I'll play with that more before I take it into a critique with Angela for a leveling process. But I think you bring some interesting ideas because there is some maybe some distractions in the sky right in the middle there. Some little maybe
Right
they're
in
little
this.
stray clouds or something in there that
Yeah.
I could clone out. And I think I could play with it just a little bit more. But I was kind of happy. It's the first time I'd really used that app for anything, and it kind of led me to a good vantage point for the rising sun. I didn't drive around all morning frantically looking for a spot, you know, as the sun was coming up. I was set up on this waiting for the sun to arise, and that was a pretty neat experience for me to plan something like that and have it work out.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
so
Yeah, that's always nice when you have something planned and it actually works as you expect it to. It seems
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's not always the case on that. I was just going to comment one other thing that I appreciate about this image is the fact that you've got this rockiness and this roughness of this edge along here, and it contrasts so nicely with the absolute smooth softness of the water and
Hmm.
the sky along there too. Um, nice, very nice image.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's see if I can get back to there. All right. So, any other questions before we sign off here?
No,
We'll
I
hang
think
we'll hang on just for a minute.
it's been a great session. You always your comments on everybody's photos in our cohort are always just so spot on. Like you'll point out something about that you like about a photo, and then I say, oh yeah, I like that too, and I maybe noticed it on a subconscious level, but you're always able to articulate those things so well. And I think you're a natural for critique. You have a tremendous eye, and so anyway, all the little things that you pointed out today are things to work on these photos. So I'm glad we did this so that I can not only just for the experience, but also to help me make stronger images when if I take, I'll probably take some of these into my next critique with Angela.
I hope you do. I hope you do. Thank you for the kind words as well. All right,
You're
I'm going to
welcome.
stop the broadcast now, but we'll still be here for a second.
Okay.